Hey everyone, welcome back to Learner's World. Today's video is going to be over some of the people of World War II, which took place between 1939 to 1945. I will have a Quizlet linked in the description box below if you want to check that out. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting off with Adolf Hitler. He was an Austrian-born German politician that became the dictator of Germany during the Nazi era between 1933 until his suicide in 1945. In 1933, he became the Chancellor of Germany. Throughout World War II, he was closely involved in the direction of the German military operations. Hitler was the central person to the perpetration of the Holocaust. Audie Murphy was an American soldier, actor, and songwriter. Murphy was widely celebrated as the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. He received every military combat award for valor for the U.S. Army, as well as French and Belgian awards for heroism. Murphy died in a plane crash in Virginia in 1971, shortly before his 46th birthday. Winston Churchill was a British statesman, military officer, and writer. He was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 1945. He was Prime Minister again from 1951 to 1955. Churchill was a Member of Parliament from 1900 to 1964. In 1895, he joined the British Army and saw action in British India, the Mahdist War, and the Second Boer War, gaining fame as a war correspondent and writing books about his campaigns. Joseph Stalin was a Soviet revolutionary and politician. Stalin led the Soviet Union from 1924 until his death in 1953. He held office as General Secretary of the Communist Party from 1922 to 1952. Despite initially governing the country as part of a collective leadership, he eventually consolidated power to become a dictator by the 1930s. Stalin industrialized the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, forcibly collectivized its agriculture, consolidated his position by intensive police terror, helped to defeat Germany in 1941 to 1945, and extended Soviet controls to include a belt of Eastern European states. Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the 34th President of the United States. He served as president from 1953 to 1961. As a general of the Army, Eisenhower was the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. His successful leadership is seen in Operation Torch from 1942 to 1943 and Operation Overlord, June to August of 1944. During World War I, he was denied a request to serve in Europe and instead commanded a unit that trained tank crews. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Eisenhower was assigned to the General Staff in Washington, where he served until June of 1942 with responsibility for creating the major war plans to defeat Japan and Germany. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States, served 4 terms as president. First 2 terms he served were centered on combating the Great Depression. His last 2 terms were focused on the U.S. involvement in World War II. He was elected into the New York State Senate in 1910 before he became the Assistant Secretary of the Navy under President Woodrow Wilson. Major surviving programs and legislation implemented under Roosevelt include the Securities and Exchange Commission, the National Labor Relations Act, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Social Security. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Roosevelt obtained a declaration of war on Japan and subsequently on Japan's Axis partners Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Erwin Rommel. He was a German general field marshal. Rommel was a highly decorated officer in World War I, nicknamed the Desert Fox. He served as field marshal in Wehrmacht defense force of Nazi Germany during World War II. He supported the Nazi seizure of power and Adolf Hitler, although he had a reluctant stance towards anti-Semitism and Nazi ideology. In 1944, Rommel was implicated in the July 20 plot to assassinate Hitler. Emperor Hirohito remains the longest reigning emperor of Japan. He was the 124th emperor of Japan. He reigned from 1926 until his death in 1989. After Hirohito formally sanctioned his government's decision to go to war against the U.S. and its allies on December 1, 1941, Japan entered World War II upon its military attack on Pearl Harbor, as well as its invasion of American and European colonies in Asia and the Pacific. Following Japan's surrender, Emperor Hirohito was never prosecuted for war crimes at the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, or IMTFE, even though the war had waged in his name, or had been waged in his name. Harry Truman was the 33rd U.S. president. During his time as vice president, he didn't receive a briefing on the development of the atomic bomb or the unfolding difficulties of Soviet Russia. Soon after VE Day, Truman ordered atomic bombs to be dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As part of what became known as the Truman Doctrine, Truman asked Congress to aid Turkey and Greece. Charles de Gaulle, he was a general and is a former president of France. De Gaulle led the Free French forces against Nazi Germany and Vichy France in World War II from 1944 to 1946. To restore democracy in France, he chaired the provisional government of the French Republic. At the outbreak of World War II, he was put in command of the French Fifth Army tanks. Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was an Italian politician, journalist, and dictator who led Italy, as those do say, from 1922 until his overthrow in 1943. Mussolini founded the fascist movement in 1919 with the creation of the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento, which became the National Fascist Party, PNF, in 1921. Mussolini was appointed Prime Minister of Italy after the March on Rome in 1922, establishing the totalitarian dictatorship. He oversaw Italy's participation in World War II as a prominent member of the Axis powers and was summarily executed near the end of the war in 1945. Douglas MacArthur, American general who served as a top commander during World War II and the Korean War, achieving the rank of General of the Army. MacArthur was nominated for the Medal of Honor 3 times and awarded it for his World War II service in the Philippines. He is one of only 5 people to hold the rank of General of the Army and the only person to hold the rank of Field Marshal in the Philippine Army. On July 26, 1941, Roosevelt federalized the Philippine Army, called MacArthur to active duty in the U.S. Army as a major general, and named him commander of the U.S. Army Forces in the Far East, or USAF-FE. George S. Patton. Patton was a general in the United States Army who commanded the 7th Army in the Mediterranean theater of World War II, then the 3rd Army in France and Germany after the Allied invasion in Normandy in June 1944. During the maneuvers the Third Army conducted in 1940, Patton served as umpire, where he met Adna R. Chaffee Jr., and the two formulated recommendations to develop an armored force. Patton was promoted to brigadier general on October 2nd and made acting division commander in November, when Charles L. Scott assumed command of one armored corps, and on April 4th of 1941 was promoted again to Major General as commanding general, or CG, of the 2nd Armored Division. Georgy Zhukov, a Soviet military leader who served as top commander during World War II. He achieved the rank of Marshal of the Soviet Union during World War II. Zhukov served as Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces under leadership of Joseph Stalin and oversaw some of the Red Army's most decisive victories. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist and humanitarian credited for saving the lives of 1,200 Jews during the Holocaust by employing them in his enamelware and ammunition factories in German-occupied Poland and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Lyle Bock, at 20 years old, Lieutenant Lyle Bock commanded what would become World War II's most decorated U.S. platoon, an intelligence and reconnaissance unit from the 99th Division. He received the Prisoner of War Medal, Silver Star, and the Distinguished Service Cross. He enlisted in the Missouri National Guard at age 14 during World War II. He was a 20-year-old lieutenant in charge of the Intelligence and Reconnaissance Platoon, 394th Infantry Regiment, 99th Infantry Division. On the first morning of the Germans' advance during the Battle of the Bulge, his 18-man unit, along with 4 forward artillery observers, held off an entire German battalion of more than 500 men for nearly an entire day, killing or wounding 92 and significantly delayed the German advance in a vital sector of the Northern Front. Felix Sparks, the captain of E Company, 157th Infantry Regiment, to lieutenant colonel, in charge of a task force that was to hunt down Adolf Hitler, but instead liberated Dachau concentration camp in April on the 29th in 1945. Felix L. Sparks served as a U.S. Army infantry officer in World War II and during the Cold War. Bob Sales, he landed aged just 18 in the second wave of the deadliest section of Omaha Beach on D-Day, rolling dead bodies in front of him to stay alive. He fought on with B Company, 116th Infantry Regiment, until wounded near Aachen. He enlisted at age 15. 6 months after D-Day, he was severely wounded in both eyes by shrapnel in Germany. He spent roughly 18 months recovering in the hospital, losing sight in one eye and regaining partial sight in the other. Sales received the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and the French Legion of Honor. He built a private memorial in his backyard in Madison Heights, Virginia, to honor the 113 men of Company B who died in World War II. Bill Leibold was the last living survivor of the USS Tang. He was one of the just 9 survivors from 87 men who were fished from the ocean by vengeful Japanese and who somehow survived POW camps. He passed away in 2022, aged 99. Leibold joined the U.S. Navy at aged 17, and by October 1944, 80 years ago, he was chief boatswain's mate aboard the USS Tang, the most lethal American submarine of all time. Leibold had just been involved in some of the more dramatic incidents of undersea combat in the Pacific, from the rescue of 22 downed aviators on Tang's second outing to the 3rd patrol that claimed a record-setting 10 merchant ships. Leibold was career military, serving 30 years in the U.S. Navy. During his Navy career, he was highly regarded as a diving expert and was involved in forming the Navy SEAL team. Abraham Baum. Baum served with the 4th Armored Division during World War II. He was born in New York and grew up in the Bronx. His father was a Russian Jewish immigrant, and his mother was an American of Romanian descent. When he enlisted in the Army, he was sent to basic engineer training. He transferred to the 2nd Armored Division, 17th Engineer Battalion. He had an older brother who joined the Army after him. Baum wanted to join the Air Force, but knew he had low blood pressure and vision problems. He didn't follow the war. Before Pearl Harbor, Baum applied for OCS, or Officer Candidate School, with the help of another student, Bob Slaughter. Bob was a towering figure, 6 foot 6 inches on D-Day, landing with D Company of the 116th Infantry Regiment on Omaha Beach. He was assigned to Company D, 116th Regiment. Slaughter trained as a machine gun operator, but as he later wrote, there was no hint that any of us would ever see combat. He and some buddies volunteered for specialized service in a new elite unit, the 29th Rangers. An exemplary soldier, he went on to earn 2 Bronze Stars and 2 Purple Hearts. Bill Edwards. Bill flew 27 combat missions as an Eagle pilot, became a POW, and served his country for decades more. The Private Bill Edwards entered the U.S. Army from Missouri and served in the 3206 Quartermaster Services Company. He was aboard either LST 507 or LST 531 during the attack on April 28th and was killed in the incident. His remains were not recovered following the war, and he is still unaccounted for today. Private Edwards is memorialized on the wall of the missing at the Cambridge American Cemetery in England. Philip Jackson, he was a 15-year-old only child when his parents joined the French Resistance in 1943. His father was Sumner Jackson, chief surgeon of the American Hospital in Paris. His mother was a Swiss nurse. The family lived at 11 Avenue Foch, a short walk from mass-murdering Gestapo and SS officials. Philip survived Neuengamme concentration camp. His father did not. Charles Shea is the last living medic from Omaha Beach. He landed on D-Day and saved as many lives as he could, pulling the badly wounded from the bloody surface. He was an American Penobscot tribal elder, writer, and decorated veteran of both World War II and the Korean War, alongside with a Bronze Star and Silver Star. Shea was also awarded the Legion of Honor, making him the first Native American in Maine with the distinction of French Chevalier. Shea was drafted into the military in 1943 at the age of 19. He was selected for training as a medical technician and learned basic surgery skills. Shea joined the medical detachment of the 1st Divisions, or the Big Red One, 16th Infantry Regiment, and was attacked as a platoon medic to Fox Company. Alice Brewer, she was a Holocaust survivor, saved twice in Hungary by the Swedish diplomat Raoul Wallenberg. Her family was wiped out by the Nazis. She and her husband became psychiatrists after the war, thanks to Wallenberg, who had issued them with safe passes. Her and her husband survived the murder of most of their fellow Jewish Hungarians. Some 500,000 had been gassed at Auschwitz in the summer of 1944. Josephine Baker, during World War II, she was a legendary entertainer. Josephine Baker transformed into a heroic spy and operative for the French Resistance, British intelligence, and the U.S. OSS. Leveraging her global fame, she attended Access events, gathered vital intelligence, and smuggled secret messages written in invisible ink on her musical sheet music. She used her celebrity status to charm Axis officials and glean valuable intel, later playing a vital go-between intermediary role in North Africa for Allied counterintelligence after 1942. Virginia Hall, codenamed Bookworm, was an American who worked with the United Kingdom's Clandestine Special Operations Executive, SOE, and the American Office of Strategic Services, OSS, in France during World War II. Hall was the first female SOE agent to take up residence in France, arriving in Vichy, France in August 1941. She created the Heckler Network in Lyon. Over the next 15 months, she became an expert at support operations, organizing resistance movements, supplying agents with money, weapons, and supplies, helping downed airmen to escape, offering safe houses and medical assistance to wounded agents and pilots. Nancy Wake, also known as Madame Fioca and Nancy Fioca, was a New Zealand-born Australian nurse and journalist who joined the French Resistance and later the Special Operations Executive, SOE, during World War II, and briefly pursued a post-war career as an intelligence officer in the Air Ministry. After reaching Britain, Wake joined the Special Operations Executive and was trained in several programs. Vera Adkins, who was the senior female in the SOE overseeing the agents going into France, recalls her as a real Australian bombshell, tremendous vitality, flashing eyes. Everything she did well. That's all I have for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit the like button below and forward it to somebody else who might find it helpful as well. And if there's a topic you want to see in a future video, please leave in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye!